Hi friends, it's Deanna Willison with our Blooming Catholic Life, and you had to know it was only a matter of time before we talked about granny squares. Why? They are like the granny's classic dishcloth to knitting. They are the basic foundation of so many crochet projects, super and easy charity projects. They're very popular right now, great to donate. Granny squares are also great because they have these spaces. Now, don't mind my little ends here. We'll get to this in a minute. They've got all these spaces between. They're quick, fun, easy to make. You can see there can be a great variety, but also these pockets here, if you put a solid blanket above and below them, you've now got these pockets are air and full of insulation. But should you want it in the summertime, use this as your only blanket. It's not too hot because of these very same open little pockets where the air can breathe. So they're good for any time of year. You just use them differently. Again, they're easy to make. There's really only one stitch. I guess there's two. You have your double crochet, and then when you get to a corner, you may do some slip stitching, but very, very basic things. They're great for beginners, and they're very modular. If you have friends who can make a square the same size as you can work on projects together. Another great thing that makes them great for charities is people can donate just the squares, and then there's other charities who are really good at sewing them together to make various things. And we're going to get to that again in a minute. This is one of those new, let me grab it here and grab a full skein of this. This is the Granny all-in-one square yarn from Red Heart. You can see it's quite the variety of colors. I was very attracted to these colors, and you can see how they knit up. Now you probably noticed my ends are shorter than normal. That's because they only give you 4 inches here. This yarn is the color changes happen all by themselves, and you have to be ready to start that new round precisely where it says, or your colors will be mixed up. And the point of granny squares used to be to use up scraps. So each round is a different color, so it looks a little different. But now they've put it all in one yarn. Why? Because of all these ends. Each round would normally have a beginning and an end. So to do this simple square, that's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you've had 10 ends to weave in, plus then all the ends from joining. Crazy talk. So they came up with this. Now the trick here is it would take you some time to sew in ends, and they can be fiddly. It can be just as fiddly to get them to end exactly where you want them to end. I did a fairly good job on this. It's not perfect. You can see some of them maybe more than others. Like here, you can actually see the color change. And occasionally there's a color, and I'm not going to find one now that I'm pointing it out. Like there's a little bit of this lighter green here in this darker green. Just here and there, a little thread. So a little bit of bleed over from it. It's pretty good. But sometimes you get to an end of a row and you're like, ugh, I am not in the right place. I have too much yarn. I don't have enough yarn. So if you have too much, rip out a little bit of that row. And if it's too much you do it looser. If you have too little, you go back and do it tighter. So you can adjust. You can also use different size hooks. If you're consistently having too much, you want to go to a bigger hook. If you're consistently having too little, you want to go to a smaller hook. That's not rocket science. And the biggest trick for me is actually I get used to eyeballing when the end is coming and where I need to end. And when I get to the last round, I keep forgetting. I go on autopilot and forget that I need to have 4 inches left to make my tail for the end. So that's me. So I have to go back and then crochet a little bit more tighter so that I can get this. The main thing, if you're using this yarn as it's intended, is to read the directions. Problemo. The directions are super tiny. Now they are giving you a project to make. They're giving you this little vest how to make. So a lot of it's that. The diagram is showing you how to make your granny square. And I can hold it up for you big here. It's not so big in the package. It's very small. It's maybe slightly larger than a postage stamp. So it is hard to read this chart. And they do have it written out in the pattern. If you look at the pattern for the actual one, and it tells you the motif. You can read out the pattern if you like written directions. So what to do? You take a picture of it with your phone and make it bigger, like anything else we do these days. There is also a QR code. It's going to take you to a web page with facts, tips and tricks, possibly some videos to go over. And one other tip with this yarn is, see how it says white watermelon. White watermelon. What does that mean? White is the outside row. You are going to need to buy more white. That's what they expect you to join it with. They're expecting you to join with white. You normally join with whatever your outside color is. Now, if you want something different, say for some reason you want another bright color, you want this orange, you would just do your last row, add another row on these, that is this orange, and then use this orange for your color. So you're going to need, this is not, it says all in one ball. It's not. It's just to make the squares. It's not to join them or do any fancy edgings. It is just for this. Can you use this yarn in other ways? Absolutely. So we're going to talk about some other things. So you saw in the pattern, you can use these to make vests. There's all kinds of patterns. You can make blankets. You can make pillows. You can very easily use it to make a shawl, a scarf, whatever you want once you have these little squares. And that is one of the fun things of doing this with friends and all adding up with the same size squares. Now, that's always been tricky to end up with the same size squares. And that's where this is strength. You're going to end up, almost no matter what you do, with a 6-inch square. That's just because of how much yarn there is. You're limited. You can't vary it that much. You can't suddenly make it bigger. You're going to have to get gauged. You are forced to get gauged in this one pretty much. And so everybody's going to end up with a 6-inch square. So if you're doing it for charity where everybody makes a square and you want the same size, this could be the way to go. And you're like, but I don't want them all the same. Well, don't worry. It comes in different colors. Like, look at this fun green one. It's more of like a camouflage look, but these squares would go really nicely together. Again, trick is this one ends in a black. It's a little hard to see in the picture, but the name is Black Verdant Vine. So this is, again, one that you would want to pick a color. Now, since it's green and green, maybe you'd want something green to put together, or brown would work. That would probably tie them in some shade of brown as well. So again, you'd have to do a row outside of all of these. You'd want to buy a solid, outline all of these, and then you could sew them together. There's thousands and thousands of ways to join them to make sweaters, scarves, dog sweaters. You can use them to make shorts. I really don't recommend the shorts, but really cute skirts. These do make really cute skirts. And they do make pants. The skirts, of course, you'd wear something underneath. The pants, that's a little awkward. You'd have to wear leggings underneath. Not the worst look in the world. Something a little different. Not my taste. But again, they'd probably be really warm. Okay. Now, I also wanted to talk. I'm going to come back next week and show you some of these projects with a little more progress on them. But I wanted to get you the hint of it. What is a hexagon granny? Hexagon grannies have been popular for, about 5 years because you can make a sweater easily just by making 2 big hexagon grannies. So these grannies, you could theoretically just keep going and going and going and make one giant. Instead of making little squares, make one giant square for whatever you're doing. I guess a blanket normally, right? You could go as big as you want. So you can see this starts off with 1, 2, 3, 4. And those initial 4 become your 4 corners. See? That's how you end up with a square. But what if you started out with 6? If you started out with 6, which is a little hard to see, you're going to end up with 6 corners. And you're probably like, well, why would I want this rumpled up wool? Because if you fold it in half, and not that way, there's always somebody that does it. It's funny how there's a right and a wrong way to fold it in half. I'll get this. Because it's 6. Aha! Here we go. You can see it's a funny little, I was going to say it's a letter G. I went into Korean there, excuse me. But it's like half a sweater. See, if we had a little baby here, this would be the body and this is the arm. So what you would end up having to do is sew across here, right? The top of the arm. Now you're like, but that's not going to work, right? When you have a second one, you're going to sew them together at the back. Leave the front open, and you can have a very basic granny square, hexagon, granny sweater. Some tips and tricks. Some people do just that. They don't do any edging. Some people like to have an extra panel in the back because they'd like to have it lay flat against their back, or perhaps they're a little bit wider than the sweater would normally allow. And so you want to balance your sweater width with your sleeve width, right? You don't want the sleeve width to get crazy. So some people add a panel in the back. Sometimes that panel is a form of a granny square. You can do a matching granny square and put them down the back. Some people do stripes. Some people do a solid color. And again, you can add a button band to the front. You can add ribbing to the sleeves, edges, and there's so many variations, but this is the basic pattern. And I wanted to stop for a second to talk about some different ways of doing this. People love these patterns. One thing I have noticed though, be very careful. Whatever your starting color is the color that's going to be your underarm. I'd like to point that out. You probably don't want bright red here or bright green. Think about those colors there. You don't want it to look like a stain or like you have some sort of weird disease. So you're going to want to think about your colors. Now I have here an ombre yarn. Red Heart also makes the ombre. You can see how the colors gently change, right? Similar thing. What's this going to look like? Well, again, you can see it's going to be darker in the underarm, so that may be a little awkward. This is really, I would say, in general, it may be 4 kind of colors, but maybe it's 3. You may want to go, even if your yarn starts with the lightest or the darkest color, you may want to pull that out and go with one of the medium colors for the direct underarm. That's going to be your starting, and then just go from there. See how that does appear to be the darkest color. I've done it again. It's going to be your darkest color. Again, do it how you want, but this is going to be the basic of your granny. Now, I've done another one. I grabbed, remember our friend over here, our black Verdant Fine Granny Square all-in-one. And look, this is not a variegated, right? And so it's going to end up very uniquely. You're not going to have every round be one color. And so you may want to play around with how it looks. It's funny how I keep getting it messed up. So this one, wait, that doesn't look, this is also inside out. How did I know that? The end row, you have these nice, lovely V's on the right side row. So we either have this, or we're going to have this. This looks pretty nice. This in the back looks a little funky, doesn't it? It's not going to line up perfectly. This is more abstract, so each round is not going to be one color or slowly changing color. It's going to do something a little more abstract, and some people may like that. Again, we'll have to play with that and see how it ends up. Again, this is black. It's going to expect you to end on black, but because we're not following the pattern, you are going to want to decide on what color to end up with edgings. And you're probably going to want to do an edging all around because you want to be 100% sure that this seam is going to be the same color. And you can see my front isn't. My front is part black and part green. This one is almost all black. So this could be my back. And hopefully my other one would end up with black as well. So you're going to want to try and match them up or not. Know that if you don't match up the colors where you're seaming, like this would be black on black, if you don't match them up, whatever color you sew the seam with, or you may crochet the seam, there's a variety of ways to do seams. We can talk about that in another episode. That's going to show. And you may like it and you may not. Just keep that in mind. You're going to see your seaming stitches if they're not all the same color. that's it for today. I just wanted to bring you some possibilities of granny squares. Again, great for charity work. You can imagine, I did both of these in an hour and a half today. This is already like, this is like a 3-month-old baby size just on this half. So you could easily do projects for a baby in a day. This could be a little preemie sweater. I wouldn't do this for preemies because of these holes. Their little fingers could get caught in them. So I wouldn't do it for an infant, a preemie. I would not do that for an infant. But for a little bit older baby, you can make these in no time, which is awesome because you can wait until you find out the baby sex. You can wait until you find out some of the little characteristics or how their bedroom is decorated or whatever colors the parents really favor. You can find that out and personalize it a little bit more. You could also make buttons. Again, be careful with baby buttons. You want to make sure that they're safe for baby. But after you do that, you could make little ones that are the appropriate colors, or you could make something a little generic like this teal one, but maybe down the road add cars or flowers, depending on whatever you need. So you can definitely adapt them. Super easy to do. Again, you can have something bold and funky. You're not going to lose their baby outside if they're wearing this. They will blend into nature. So what is your preference? There's lots of fun yarns out there that aren't weird textures, just fun ways of making color. Friends, I hope this video has helped bless you and bless others, and I hope to see you later on tonight for our Lectio Divina, where we pray the sacred scriptures. God bless you, friends.